that we are moving, Lex, to an oligarchic form of society. And not a lot of people are familiar with that term, but what it means, we talk about oligarchy in Russia. Putin is surrounded by the oligarchs. Well, guess what? What do you think is happening in the United States? So what you have right now is an economy with more concentration of ownership than we've ever had. All right, that means whether it's agriculture, transportation, healthcare, whatever it may be, fewer and fewer massively large corporations control what's produced and the prices we pay.
In today's video, Bernie Sanders schools Lex Fridman on exactly how corrupt the US government has become. From corporate lobbies writing our laws to billionaires buying elections, Bernie broke it all down. This wasn't some vague rant, it was detailed, specific, and backed with hard truth. Bernie explained how both parties have been bought off, how working class Americans keep getting left behind, and how concentrated wealth is rigging every part of our system. Healthcare, education, taxes, you name it. If you've ever thought the system feels rigged, Bernie basically shows you why you're absolutely right. So let's dive in and watch how Bernie Sanders educates Lex Fridman in this video.
And then you look at our political system, and we don't talk about it. What is the reality of the political system today? And that is that billionaires are spending huge amounts of money to buy this election. In Trump's campaign, you got three multi-billionaires spending over $200 million. Three people. Democrats have their billionaires not quite as concentrated. But at the end of the day, billionaires play an enormous role in terms of electing politicians and in Washington in determining what legislation gets seen and not seen.
But it's not just single billionaires, it's companies with lobbyists.
You got it. Let me give you one example. Lobbyists. We pay in the United States by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. This is an issue I've been working hard on with some success. Take a wild and crazy guess. How many lobbyists are there from the drug companies in Washington, D.C.?
Well, over 1,000.
Over 1,000, right? There are 100 members of the Senate, 435 members of the House, 535 members of Congress. There are 1,800 well-paid lobbyists representing the drug companies, including former leaders of the Republican and Democratic Party. That is why, one of the reasons why, we pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. Military-industrial complex. You got a revolving door. People go from the military into the General Dynamics, into Lockheed Martin and the other large companies. And what we see there is an institution in the Pentagon. We spend $1 trillion a year on the Pentagon. It is the only federal agency that is not able to submit to an independent audit. So if you think there's not massive fraud and waste and cost overruns in the Pentagon, you would be sorely mistaken.
Do you think most politicians are corrupt in accepting the money, or is the system corrupt, or is it a bit of both?
If the corrupt means that, hey, here's $10,000, vote this way, doesn't work like that. Very, very rare. Occasionally, very, very rare. That's corruption. What happens is that if you are in a campaign, and right now the amount of money that people have to raise, you're running for Senate in Ohio, you're talking about $50, $60 million. Where the hell are you going to get that money? It's not going to be $10 donations. You're going to be surrounding yourself with people who have the money. You're going to go $5,000 a plate dinners, etc. So you surround yourself with those people who say, oh, these are my problems. This is what I need. I need a tax break for billionaires, blah, 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 blah. So you live in that world. They are your financial support. They are, in a sense, your political base. So you're very cognizant of what you do in terms of not upsetting them. So it's not corruption in the sense of people, taking envelopes with huge amounts of money to vote a certain way. That very, very rarely, if ever, happens. It is the power of big money to make politicians dependent on those folks. And that's why, when I ran for president, what I'm probably maybe most proud of is the fact that we received millions and millions of campaign contributions, averaging $27 a piece, I think, in 2016.
Now, Bernie hits the nail on the head when he called it what it is, an oligarchy. We love to point fingers at Russia or other countries and say, oh, look at their oligarchs. But the truth is, the US has their own. Whether it's healthcare, agriculture, tech, or defense, a tiny number of corporations control everything from what we consume to the prices we pay. And because they control so much of the economy, they've locked in massive influence over our politics too. When Bernie said there are 1,800 lobbyists just for big pharma in Washington, it sounded like an exaggeration. But it's not. It's a real number. That's more than 3 lobbyists for every member of Congress, just from the pharmaceutical industry. No wonder we pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. These companies aren't just making their case, they're drowning lawmakers in money and access. And corruption isn't the cartoon version where politicians are slipping envelopes under the table. Like Bernie said, it's about who you surround yourself with when you're trying to raise $50 or $60 million for a Senate campaign. You're not eating lunch with nurses and teachers. You're doing $5,000 a plate dinners with hedge fund guys and CEOs. Their problems become your priorities.
Have companies, lobbyists ever tried to buy you, try to influence you?
We don't welcome them into our office. I do deal with these guys, but it's usually on a confrontational tone. No, so they don't come into my office very often telling me their problems.
So how do we fix the system? How do we get money out of politics?
This is not, like many other issues, we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. It exists in other countries. If you go to, every country has their own election system, but nobody has a system where billionaires can spend unlimited sums of money through super PACs to elect the candidates of their choice. So first thing you got to do, one of the things, Lex, I found that the more important the issue, the less discussion there is. The less important the issue, the more discussion there is. A number of years ago, the United States Supreme Court, in one of its more pathetic decisions, passed the Citizens United decision. And what Citizens United decision said is, you're a multi-billionaire. You want the freedom. You're a free person in a free country. You want the freedom to buy the government. And how terrible it would be to deny you the freedom to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on a campaign to elect the candidates. And they said that's your freedom, and that's what Citizens United is about. We've got to end that. In my view, we move to public funding of elections. That means you want to run for governor, you want to run for Senate, show that you have some support, get $5 contributions from X number of people to show you're not a flake. You have some support, and government will pay a certain amount more, and there will be a limit on the amount of money that can be spent. So it'll be a real, you can run against me, and I'm not going to outspend you 10 to 1. That's what we should be moving toward, in my view.
How do we make that happen when there's so much money in the system and the politicians owe to the people who paid for their election? Does it have to come from the very top, essentially sort of a really strong, populist president?
But you're right. You raised exactly the question. If I am getting a huge amount of money from billionaires, do you think I'm going to go out and announce, I think billionaires should not be involved in buying elections? I doubt that very much. So what you're going to need, and you tell me if I'm missing something, but I pay attention, you don't hear either of the major candidates talking about that issue, do you?
I think what happens is when an individual politician speaks out about it, they get punished. But I think this is a popular idea. So if a lot of them speak out, that's why if it came from the top, if a president was using a very large platform to basically speak out, it provides a safety blanket for the other politicians to get it all out of the system. But there has to be a kind of a mass movement of it.
Yes, it does. I mean, and every place I go, I always speak about the issue. And people understand it. You're a Republican, you're a Democrat, you're progressive, you're conservative. Who really believes that we are a democracy when billionaires can spend, tens and tens of millions of dollars to buy elections? So it is a very popular issue. It's important. You're right. We need political leaders to be speaking out on that. But we need a grassroots movement to say, when somebody is at a town meeting, you're running for the Senate, you're running for the House, what's your view on Citizens United? Are you prepared to vote to overturn that decision and move to public funding of elections? Extraordinarily important.
Now, there's Citizens United, which Bernie rightly called one of the most pathetic Supreme Court decisions in recent history. That ruling opened the floodgates for billionaires to legally spend unlimited amounts of money through super PACs to buy elections. It's like we gave the wealthiest people in the country a cheat code to democracy. To back Bernie's claims, the numbers speak for themselves. In the 2022 election cycle, just 100 individuals were responsible for over 70% of all super PAC donations. That's not a functioning democracy. That's a billionaire bidding war. And let's not forget that the top 1% of donors now account for more than 40% of all campaign contributions in federal races. Bernie's fix is pretty straightforward. Publicly funded elections. That means you show grassroots support, say a bunch of $5 donations from real people, and you get a match from the government. That way, running for office doesn't depend on kissing up to millionaires. That model already works in states like Maine and Arizona, and it's helped elect people who actually represent their communities, not just corporate interests. What makes this so powerful is how bipartisan the frustration is. You can be Republican, Democrat, Independent. Nobody wants a system where a handful of wealthy donors control who even gets to run.
So many of your policy proposals are quite radical.
No, they're not. I beg to differ.
Okay, great.
Go through it.
Well, they're popular. So what I mean is relative to the way other politicians speak,
Yes. Okay.
it's usually a little bit more moderate. So from everything you've learned from politics, is it better to go sort of radical, maybe we can come up with a different word, versus a more moderate, safe, ambiguous kind of policies?
Okay, let's talk about it. Fair enough. We talked about one issue, very important, money in politics.
Money, yes.
Getting big money out of politics. Do you think that's a radical idea?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's a popular idea. It's an idea that makes sense, but in order to implement it and actually make it happen requires, to flip the system upside down, right? In that sense, it's radical.
In that sense, it's radical. But if you go to walk down the street here and you say, do you think billionaires should be able to spend as much money as they want to buy politicians? I would say 9 out of 10 people say, that's crazy. That's not what America's supposed to be about. So in that sense, it's certainly not radical. Let's talk about healthcare. Go out on the street, do it. We'll do a poll. I've done the polling. Is healthcare a human right? Should every American be able to go to a doctor when they need, regardless of their income? You know what people say? I would say about 85, 90% of the people say, of course. The idea that healthcare is a human right available to all exists, Lex, in every major country on earth except the United States. So you're here with me in Burlington, Vermont, right? If you got a car, go 50 miles north to Canada. Walk into Canada and ask people, when you go to the hospital, how much does it cost you? What kind of bill? And they say, what are you talking about? It doesn't cost us anything. It doesn't cost us a nickel. That's the case in virtually every country in Europe. So the idea that healthcare should be available to all, that there should be no out-of-pocket expense because it's a human right, is widespread around the world and very much agreed to in this country.
Bernie pushed back right away on the idea that his policies are radical, and he's right. What's radical about wanting people to be able to see a doctor without going bankrupt, or stopping billionaires from buying elections? These aren't fringe demands. They're common sense backed by solid data. Take healthcare, for example. Bernie pointed out that every major country on earth, Canada, the UK, France, Germany, already treats healthcare as a human right. Americans pay more than double what people in those countries pay for healthcare. Yet, we still have tens of millions of people who are uninsured or underinsured. According to a 2023 Commonwealth Fund study, the US spends more on healthcare per capita than any other country, but ranks last among high-income nations in healthcare outcomes. That's not just inefficient, it's immoral. What's really radical is the current setup. A government that allows billionaires to buy influence, lets drug companies jack up prices with no limits, and forces people to choose between paying rent or filling a prescription. That's the system Bernie's fighting to change, and it's long overdue. At the end of the day, Bernie's message to Lex and to all of us is pretty clear. If caring about people fighting corruption and guaranteeing basic human rights makes you radical, then maybe we need more radical in our politics. Pause. Are you getting tired of getting half the story from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing and another says the complete opposite. How are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, left, right, and center are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights into media bias and political trends. Stay informed, think for yourself, and check out Ground News in the description down below.